these 3 factors. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about that, the mental health side of this. So when we're looking at mental illness and suicide, at least 90% have had a mental health concern at the time of their death. However, these concerns usually have not been recognized, diagnosed, or adequately treated. And so that's why it's important that we can kind of raise awareness within medical communities, schools, parents, churches, youth groups, so that we can provide these education on what the warning signs are and where we can go to get help. Because oftentimes there's a lot of warning signs that were not seen or heard before somebody dies by suicide, because they didn't seem like they were in need of support. A lot of times individuals who are contemplating this seem like they are functioning at a perfectly healthy and happy level, when on the inside, their mind is in chaos and in complete discomfort. So it's important that we kind of start to learn what some of these warning signs are and what some of the contributing factors are that might lead somebody to that. Okay. All right, so the next myth here: if they talk about suicide, they won't do it, so I don't need to be concerned. Well, if they're talking about suicide, it can either be a warning sign that they're getting really comfortable with this idea, which again is that kind of idea of practicing, getting used to something, that ability to actually complete the event. Or it could also be, if they're talking about it, that it's a cry for help, right? So it's one of the two most of the time. So we want to make sure that if somebody is talking about it, or if we hear some of these concerning statements, such as, I don't really know if it's worth it anymore, then usually it's a sign that, I think I need to talk to this individual. I think maybe I should point out to them that I'm concerned, because when we do that, it starts to kind of contradict those 2 fundamental beliefs of I am a burden and I am alienated and isolated. Because if somebody is taking the time to talk to them, it's going to challenge those beliefs. So it's important that we kind of move past the idea that if they're talking about it, then they're okay. All right. Another myth here. So it's too risky to talk to someone about suicide. If they were not already thinking about it, you might give them the idea to try it. So again, asking them shows that you care. If there are concerning behaviors and you reach out to talk to someone, it's going to challenge those thoughts. And for the most part, when we're looking at those 2 mind states, those have already been going on for a long enough time. So by somebody just bringing up that conversation, it's not going to further it. It's not going to change it. In all possibility, it's actually going to lessen it. It's going to kind of mitigate the actual risk for the person going through with it. Okay. All right. Another one here. So suicidal behaviors are just attention seeking, and it is better to just ignore it. So that factor of the burdensomeness, it's more than likely going to make the individual feel like talking about it would be a burden. And then when we put that in combination with the withdrawing characteristics of social alienation, usually those behaviors that a person is showing is not at all because they are attention seeking, because they think they're already burdensome. They think they're already isolated. So the last thing they want or think they can do is actually attain attention. So if someone is actually demonstrating behaviors, it's again because it might be a warning sign, that cry for help, or they are looking for evidence to contradict those mind states. And that doesn't mean that they're looking for the attention to contradict it. They're just looking for any type of experience or connection or relationship with another person that will say, no, you're not a burden, right? No, you are part of a group. You're not isolated. I do care about you. I do want to be here with me. So it's more about wanting to have that interpersonal connection and wanting to have that support with another human being, that sometimes those behaviors come out, and sometimes they can appear to be attention seeking, but it's really just I'm needing to connect to somebody. I'm wanting to connect to somebody. Okay. All right. So if they are considering suicide, there is nothing I can do. Absolutely not. And this isn't to say it becomes your responsibility and that you are solely responsible for saving this individual's life. That's not the case, because at the end of the day, we are all our own persons. We control our own behaviors, and we can't hold ourselves responsible for what others may or may not do. but we can offer some support, we can offer information, and we can just start by asking a question, right? We can just start by facilitating that conversation to let that person know that we are here and that we are listening. And again, more often than not, just having that one voice that will say, hey, I notice you and I notice that there's something going on. That's going to make a huge change in how well or in the likelihood that this person is going to go through with suicide. All right. Okay, so let's talk again a little bit more about these risk factors. Just want to make sure that these are things that we can all become a little bit more aware of and become familiar with. So a few risk factors. These are things that make it more likely that they may consider suicide at some time in their life. And protective factors are going to be the things that lessen a person's chance for suicidal thinking. And warning signs are going to indicate that a person is likely considering suicide or is at least having some concerning behavior or thoughts that might warrant some attention. So some of the risk factors might be mental health conditions, can be chronic or serious health conditions and pain. It might be access to lethal means, may have a family history of suicide, history of previous attempts, childhood abuse, family violence, harassment, bullying, relationship problems, unemployment, substance use disorders, experience in foster care system, and childhood abuse. Now, again, these are all kind of backgrounds and experiences that might contribute to the likelihood of somebody thinking or considering suicide. Doesn't necessarily, it doesn't guarantee that somebody with these experiences will. However, it's just based on kind of how the developmental processes occur during certain time frames and during certain developmental phases. The brain is going to respond to some of these experiences in various ways, and coping with some of these experiences can be very difficult. So it really depends on the type of support and community that an individual has and the resources they have access to that are going to kind of buffer some of these. And so those buffering factors are those protective factors. So we can look at those, this next slide here. All right, so what are the factors that protect people from suicide? All right, number one, just matter of safety, restricted access to lethal means of suicide. We just want to make sure that if there's weapons, medication, even location and environment, right? If is a person living alone, do they have family or friends or roommate? What is it in their environment that they can use to potentially hurt themselves? And is there a way that we can help them get rid of those? All right, and then another protective factor, ongoing support from medical and mental health care. Are they receiving services? Problem solving and conflict resolution skills. What types of mental resources does this individual have that they can use to help them get them through this time? And then resiliency. And this is a really amazing concept, right? So it's this process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, sources of stress. So when an individual has really high level of resiliency, they're going to be able to kind of work through some of these thought processes a little bit more efficiently. And resiliency is something that can be built. It's something that can be supported, whether it's through relationships like with a parent or a friend, or through something with professional support like counseling. Another factor is healthy coping skills. What types of coping skills does this person have access to? Is it substance use, or is it maybe exercise? It's going to be a huge difference in the outcomes of those two. And then also cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide. These are some things that are very inherent and deep beliefs that can kind of really be a huge buffer to that person actually going through with this, right? So they might have those two mental states, but then maybe these cultural or religious beliefs are going to be the thing that stop them from feeling that they're actually capable of going through with this. And then we have a strong family and community support. And of course, those are always going to be major protective factors for any type of stressor. Okay. All right, so recognize the warning signs. There are verbal warning signs, and these might be talking about about an individual killing themselves. They might talk about how they feel they're such a burden, maybe feeling trapped or hopeless. And hopelessness is a pretty important piece. A lot of the literature points to showing that hopelessness is a pretty big factor to look at. So if an individual is talking about how they have hope or outlook for the future, that's definitely a big sign that they're struggling and that they're considering hurting themselves. All right, and then the behavioral warning signs. They might become a little bit more withdrawn. They may isolate themselves, begin to say goodbyes, give things away, such as uh, things that were important to them. They might start trying to get rid of their pets or their animals, or maybe just trying to get rid of furniture. It can be any kind of manner of thing that all of a sudden they're trying to get rid of all of these items and unburden themselves, so to speak. It might seem like that. There can be changes in sleep, and sleep is important because not only does a lack of sleep lead to the increase of an individual feeling depressed and considering suicide, changes in sleep can also indicate that this individual is going through a pretty drastic shift in their mind state, and that is limiting their sleep. So it's kind of that cycle of I'm not getting enough sleep, and that's contributing to my depression or my thoughts of suicide, and that's contributing to my not getting enough sleep. And so then we also have if they begin any type of substance use as well to begin coping. All right, and changes in mood. We might see that they're a more tendency to become depressed, again with hopelessness, or there might be more irritability or a loss of interest in things. And the thing here that is kind of surprising and seems a little bit different is a sudden sense of calm. A lot of times we might see somebody going through a really chaotic time period, or maybe they have been very depressed or anxious for a long period of time, and all of a sudden they're very calm. And that can be a good thing. It may mean that they have found some peace and have found a way to work through it. But we want to make sure that it's not the other instance where they have found this sense of calm because they've come to that decision to commit suicide, to die by suicide. And so sometimes when an individual has actually made that decision, they feel this sense of peace because they have a plan and they have a time frame, and they're not stressed or anxious anymore about how long do I have to keep living with this. And so sometimes that sudden sense of calm is concerning, and that's something that we want to make sure that we're aware of, because it can be a little bit tricky to point out or to recognize. And finally, the biggest predictor of death by suicide is any type of previous suicide attempt. So if there's a history of that, either within the individual or within the family, we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye out for that. Okay. All right, so people who have the highest risk for suicide have a specific plan. Oh, I think we can, there we go. All right, so they have a specific plan. If we click forward, I think we'll have a list down. There we go. So a specific plan, the intent to do it, the means to carry it out, and then the specific time frame to act on it. So a specific plan, well, we'll talk about these a little bit more in depth, but a plan is how is it that they want to do it, right? What's the way that they want to in their lives? And then what is the intent, right? So we start looking about the capability. Is there a possibility this individual truly does have that intent? They have the means to do it, right? What access do they have to do these things? And then what is their time frame, right? So if they have all of these 4 factors considered and thought and planned, then it's a very high possibility that they're going to go through with it. So these are kind of the areas that we can sort of keep an ear out for and look for in conversations with people that we might be concerned for. Okay, so what can we do? We can listen, we can ask the question, and we can get them help and find them resources. We don't want to promise confidentiality. We can't promise that we'll keep this a secret because we can't ensure this, and we want to be able to make sure that we can get them help, even if it's something that they're not wanting to ask for yet, especially if it's an emergency situation. And that question we want to ask, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in the next few slides. So we can go ahead and move on to the next one here. So when we're listening, we want to be open and patient and listen for the meaning behind the words, right? So those factors of hopelessness, or maybe that sense of calm that's come up. We want to listen for some of these cues behind their words, whether it's certain vocabulary they're using, certain facial expressions and affect, certain body language. What are some of those cues that we might be able to pick up on that seem a little bit different, seem a little bit maybe questionable and concerning? And we just want to listen. We want to support their being open about their thoughts of suicide, and we don't want to judge them. All right. And something that's also very important is not to minimize their pain. We don't want to say, things aren't that bad. You're okay. You'll get through this. No, we just want to listen, right? And offer empathy rather than trying to fix the problem. So there's this kind of great little clip of a short conversation by Brene Brown, and somebody animated it. And we can kind of imagine, like, if we have like a really deep pit, and let's say a person came walking along and fell down into that pit. All right, another person comes walking down and kind of leans over and looks into the pit and says, man, that really sucks. It must be kind of hard. I'm sorry that happened to you. And then keeps walking down, right? That's kind of what sympathy is. And it's not really helpful. It's just looking at that person and saying, yeah, I don't really know what to tell you, but good luck with that. And then moving on. Empathy would be if a person climbed down in that pit with this other individual and said, you know what, I don't really know how to get you out of here. I don't really know what it's like to be stuck down here, but I can sit here with you and wait it out. I can be here with you. I don't know how to fix it, but I'll wait here with you. And just somebody taking that moment and taking that energy to provide that and to offer that to somebody who's struggling, again, it's going to contradict those beliefs. And those are the types of interactions that we want to be able to provide. Okay. All right, here we go. Now we talk about, what is this question? So asking clearly and directly, are you thinking of suicide? And we want to ask this question in a calm, empathetic, and matter-of-fact voice, right? We don't want to seem angry. We don't want to seem scared. We're just being matter-of-fact. I need to know, are you thinking of suicide? And depending on how they answer, we want to discuss that risk of suicide. And by discussing risk, right, we're talking about the plan, the intent, the means, the time frame. We want to find out what some of these details are, so that depending on how far along they are in their plan, we can step in and intervene. We can have the information to provide them, and we can start to disable it. And we can begin to disable it by helping them locate different resources, by reaching out to maybe other community health centers, by reaching out to their family members, right? If you're talking to a friend, it's just a matter of beginning with asking that question and then walking with them through that process as they go from there. And we do have kind of a video here, a nice little animation of a summary of some of these points.
If your friend mentions suicide or self-harm, take them seriously. If you believe that they're in danger, call 911 or the Poison Control Center immediately. Your friend's life.
I think we're switching over to the video. Give us one moment here. Is it working, Mary Beth? I think the sound stopped. There we go.
If your friend mentions suicide or self-harm, take them seriously. If you believe that they're in danger, call 911 or the Poison Control Center immediately. Your friend's life is more important than their privacy. Wellcasters. Have you ever had someone just want to end it all? Permanently? It's never easy to think about or hear. Yes, life can get so complicated and overwhelming, it's hard to even imagine that things would ever get better again. But most people bounce back. Unfortunately, some don't. Suicide is a tragedy that affects everyone, and it's one of the leading causes of death for people 24 and younger. Here's what to do if you suspect a friend might be having thoughts of suicide. Tip 1. Learn to recognize dangerous signs. Has your friend talked about feeling hopeless or anxious? Have you noticed a change in your friend's behavior, acting withdrawn, sleeping less, sleeping a lot more? Maybe they're abusing alcohol or drugs, giving away their belongings. Maybe your friend has even talked about hurting themselves, or worse, wanting to die. For a complete checklist of suspect behaviors, pause and print out our worksheet. Tip 2. Initiate dialogue in a non-judgmental way. Sit your friend down in a comfortable or familiar environment where the two of you can talk privately and freely. Start by telling your friend how much you care about them, but some of their behaviors have concerned you. Refer to our worksheet for ideas on how this conversation might flow. If you determine that your friend is in danger and that they need help immediately, please call 911. Household items like pills or razor blades, they quickly become lethal weapons in the hands of a suicidal person. Tip 3. React with feeling. If your friend does confide in you thoughts of suicide, be compassionate and make it known that you're there to listen. Don't aim to change their mind, start an argument, or give advice. Many people who attempt suicide don't actually want to die. They just want their suffering to end, and suicide seems like the only avenue. Engage in conversation with your friend and find out what's hurting them. Tip 4. Shift the focus from sources of pain to resources for treatment. In addition to external challenges, your friend might also be fighting internal demons that require professional care. Depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders are often present in the suicidal. Many of these illnesses can be diagnosed and treated. Encourage your friend to seek help and offer to work with them to locate a mental health professional or clinic. We strongly recommend looping their family members into this process. Tip 5. Lastly, stay connected, even after your friend has sought help and seems to be on the path to healing. Encourage other friends, roommates, and family members to check in on your friend during this vulnerable time. This is an especially important step, since many suicides occur in a period of apparent improvement. Listen, this video is a starting point. Please do your own independent research to identify more resources. But here are a few we recommend. You can save a life just by reaching out to someone who's in need. Well, that's all from me today.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go ahead and look at our final slide here. So at the end of that video, they had another great list of resources. And this is something that we kind of compiled here for our community here in San Antonio. So when we're looking, if we're talking with an individual and they are considering it and we are concerned, if it's a crisis, if it seems like the threat is pretty imminent, then we want to call 911. Or you can take them to a hospital and have them evaluated for suicidal ideations. You don't have to do this alone. It is perfectly fine to reach out to a professional or a community member or a family member. Never want to keep it a secret. Want to make sure that there are multiple people on this support system to walk through kind of this journey and this path with this individual. And it's important that you can explore resources together, because not every resource is going to be the right fit for each person. So we want to make sure that there are multiple options so that this person has the best fit for them. Another great resource is the National Suicide Lifeline, and they have a call line and a chat line as well. This can be for if an individual themselves is considering suicide, they can call this. This can be if a family member or a friend is concerned about another person, they can call this resource and get some information. Can also contact us, the Ecumenical Center. We do not provide inpatient care, but we do provide long-term outpatient care so that as the individual begins to heal and begins to recover, they have that continued support. And then we also have here Clarity Child Center, which is going to provide inpatient care services for children and adolescents, and then Laurel Ridge, which will provide for all ages. All right, and then we have some final resources here, which you all are welcome to either take a screenshot of this, or maybe we can share this PowerPoint, but just several different, again, points of information so that you can find what's going to work best for you. Okay, and Mary Beth, did you kind of want to, there any other kind of final thoughts? Or I know we have some time to hear.
We do, and if anyone has a question or a comment, we welcome you to put that into the chat and we will work our way through those. We do have a couple of comments in the chat. Elizabeth, if you could take a look at that.
Yeah, I see Miss Mina discussed about children with freezing dissociation, growing up with withdrawal and termination of life. Yeah, some of those factors of ADHD. So kind of talking about from that mental health diagnostic perspective. I see here, also a conversation about internet games. That is something that's a little bit newer. So certain types of video games that encourage or glorify suicide by one way or another. And that's a pretty concerning things. I think one good thing is that these types of games and this type of outreach, so to speak, is being pretty well monitored now. But there's always a way. There's always a way to access certain forums and environments like this. So that is definitely something to be aware of. All right, and let's see. Oh, wondering about how many primary care physicians give trauma scales. So I think that's a great thing for primary PCPs to be able to give out, because it makes such a difference as far as health outcomes goes. And then we have the Mary Beth. Thank you for sharing those resources there. Okay. And any other questions or requests?
Well, we're grateful today to have been with you and been on sharing this time with you to talk about a very difficult subject. And for anyone that is needing to take a minute, as Miss Elizabeth shared earlier, just please give yourself the space because this is a heavy topic, and reach out and talk to someone. Any closing thoughts, Elizabeth?
Oh, I don't think so. I was going to see, I think we just had a question pop up. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you for the suggestion. So updating with some compassionate language, and then also including about the prevalence in the LGBTQ community. Absolutely. Yeah, looking at some of those diverse populations that unfortunately the support isn't as open and available to them. And we definitely want to make sure that that information is out there. Okay.
There's another question in the chat. What might be the consequences of delivering into the source of pain?
Mm-hmm. When we're at least talking about this from the perspective of thinking about preventing suicide, the consequences as far as increasing the likelihood or increasing the thought process is fairly low. Again, if we're having that conversation and we're wanting to talk with, if we're talking about like a casual, like friend to friend, right? We don't necessarily want to dive too deep and ask them, well, why are you thinking this? And what led you here to the first place? And what types of experiences have you had? We don't have to go that deep. It's more of just providing that awareness and that presence to offer some support. Because going a little bit too deep absolutely can have some negative consequences. And we want to make sure that we're respectful of that individual's psychological ability to actually engage in those conversations.
And we have another comment from Jennifer. It's imperative that schools have more open dialogue with middle and high school students. Kids are getting their information from friends and on the internet versus healthy adults. That is such an important point. Thank you, Jennifer. We know that there are some resources that have been put together, and they're very good, that can be facilitated to this age group. That you can, Yellow Ribbon Suicide Campaign is one example of that you can reach out to or call an organization like ours, and we can connect you with some of those resources for psychoeducation. Another
Yeah.
comment? Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I see. I wish we could figure out better terms as far as suicide attempts over successful or failed. So that's a huge shift that's going on in the mental health community right now. So you'll notice we don't really use the words committed suicide, right? We say died by suicide, and that's just one of those language things that where we're thinking about it less as a choice and more about kind of as an illness, right? So it's we don't say committed cancer, it's died by cancer, right? So it's kind of bringing in, as one of the other participants had stated, talking about this through a more compassionate, using more compassionate language, because it's never the person's fault, right? We don't want to blame that person or make them feel like they were a failure because they did not actually go through with dying by suicide. It's more about just opening up kind of a line of conversation that allows them to feel more comfortable and more open to realizing that this is something that I am struggling with, and that's okay. And I need to be able to be open about that. So definitely want to kind of get rid of that, those language that feels blaming.
And Leslie writes, I have also heard the term stopped living as well. And another comment about our youth and our children and importance of teaching them coping skills. In the San Antonio area, we do have several nonprofit mental health organizations who do provide services for mental health counseling and support groups within school districts, and that effort is growing. And we know that there's a cost to that, but it's important that we're not only teaching our young people, but providing them a resource where they can talk to a professional as well. I think we're nearing our time together. Liz, do you want to give a closing thought, and we'll follow?
Sure. So again, thank you all for coming into it and having a conversation with us, and for your very good questions and suggestions as well. Definitely want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community and being respectful to everyone's situation and providing the information that you guys are looking for. So hopefully you guys are all going to enjoy the rest of your conference. If you're going to the rest of the Pathways conferences today, take time for self-care, especially after some of those presentations like this one today. And hope you guys have all enjoyed this morning and the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Again, the emphasis on suicide prevention and knowing what to do and say is so incredibly important, and increasingly important, as Christy notes in the chat box. So we're grateful again for your attendance and for reviewing with us the importance of walking alongside. There is a group here in San Antonio for family members and friends who've lost a loved one to suicide. That group is Solos. And if you have an interest in or know someone that would be interested in joining that support group, you're welcome to send an email to my email, which was in the resources and I'll put it in the chat as well, and we can get you connected to the group. So thank you so much for your time today, and we hope you have a wonderful conference. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.